Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we are going to go from rounds 1 through 13 of fantasy football ADP, fantasy football average draft position, and talk about the best wide receiver to draft in every single round of your 2024 fantasy football drafts. But before we can get on into the breakdown of my favorite wide receiver in every single round, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, then you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into the best wide receiver to draft in every round of fantasy football drafts in 2024. We begin with the best wide receiver in round number 1, and that is Tyreek Hill, wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins. Aggregate ADP from Sleeper, ESPN, MFL, NFFC, and Fantrax. Pick number 3. Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 2 at pick 3.1. Now, if you are going to get all hot and bothered in the comment section saying that CeeDee Lamb is the better wide receiver compared to Tyreek Hill, to me, there is a very good argument to make for both of those guys to be the wide receiver number 1 in fantasy football this season. To me, it is like splitting hairs, so I'm not going to have some crazy argument for you in the comment section if you like CeeDee Lamb more than Tyreek Hill. To me, though, the reason why I think that Tyreek Hill will end up as the wide receiver 1 is because I believe he should have been the wide receiver 1 last year, and he would have been had he not have gotten hurt. He missed a game up against the Jets following his leg injury up against the Titans. And once he came back, he wasn't really the same. Obviously, when you have a messed up leg and you're a wide receiver that relies so heavily on explosiveness, it was going to be a huge deterrent for Tyreek Hill. And still, he was the wide receiver 2 in PPR points per game, right behind CeeDee Lamb, and the wide receiver 9 in PPR. He played in 16 games, having 171 targets, 10 points per game, ranking 3rd at wide receiver, 119 receptions, 7.4 per game, number 2, 1,799 receiving yards, 112.4 per game, number 1, and 13 total touchdowns, number 2 at wide receiver. So all of the important metrics at the wide receiver position, Tyreek Hill ranked inside of the top 3. He also, in terms of efficiency, was 1st in yards per route run, 1st in route win rate. He ranked 5th in target accuracy. I understand that, sure, he ranked 2nd in drops. It wasn't great that he had butterfingers at times. It wasn't great that he dropped some touchdowns, in my opinion. He dropped some long balls, but at the end of the day, it's okay, because when you are getting an exorbitant amount of targets like Tyreek Hill, if you have 7 drops, sure, it sucks, but it doesn't really mean much, because he is going to see a crazy amount of targets. Again, the Dolphins are going to use him as the wide receiver 1, and if the Miami Dolphins are able to figure out how to be a little bit more effective in the cold in the late season, then Tyreek Hill's upside would be even bigger, because in those late season games when the Dolphins are struggling, that certainly does hurt Tyreek Hill's upside. But at the same token, Tyreek Hill is still solid in those games, even if the Dolphins end up getting spit roasted, because for some reason, as a Dolphins fan, we just can't play in December. I don't know why. But when push comes to shove, if I am the number 2 overall pick, Christian McCaffrey is already off the board, I am picking Tyreek Hill. This is a guy that any given game could hit the game breaker from the old NFL Street video games, right? And score 25, 30 plus fantasy points, put the whole team on his back. They could hop in the backpack Dora style, and I expect Tyreek Hill to dominate 50 Shades of Grey style again. And as a Dolphins fan, I am ecstatic to see that Tyreek Hill is having yet another kid. This dude has a million baby mamas. He's like the modern day fucking Genghis Khan. This dude is going to have, I think, his 12th kid coming up, so he can already fill up a full offense with 11 kids. Maybe he's looking to get the defense with another 11 kids, right? He get the all 22. And the best part about that as a Dolphins fan is he's going to need to pay those baby mamas. He's going to need to pay that money up. And you know what that means? A lot more years with the Dolphins, baby. At number 2, we got Marvin Harrison Jr., Maserati Marv of the Arizona Cardinals, aggregate ADP pick 14, underdog fantasy ADP wide receiver 9 at pick 13.6. So I'm starting to see people get a little bit hotter on Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Early on in the fantasy football drafting process, I'm talking right after the NFL draft, there were people that were incredibly nervous about Marvin Harrison Jr., and I'm still seeing it in the comment section. But his ADP rising up is telling me that people are starting to be less cautious. Now, if you asked me 10 years ago, Nick, as a 15-year-old, 14-year-old, however long old I would have been at that point, of 25, so 15, quick math. Nick, are you comfortable drafting a rookie wide receiver in the second round? The answer would be, fuck no, baby, because just 10 years ago, rookie wide receivers would get slow rolled, right? It would take them a while to become the dominant alpha, clear number one option in their offense. But it is not 2015. It is 2024. And what is going to happen in this offense is that Marvin Harrison is going to step in day number one, day numero uno, as the clear number one option on this team. We have seen rookie wide receivers step in and demolish the competition. We saw it last year with Puka Nacua. So while the people are going to get their panties on a bunch about drafting a rookie wide receiver in the second round, I'll tell you right now, you don't need to be scared. Marvin Harrison Jr., in my opinion, is a generational prospect. He is the clear alpha wide receiver on an offense that doesn't have a lot of targets. Outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride, sure, they have Michael Wilson, they now have Zay Jones, they have some quote-unquote smaller names, but at the end of the day, those guys aren't Marvin Harrison. So from day number one, I think Kyler Murray is going to feed this guy the ball. If you throw on his college tape from Ohio State, your eyes are going to ejaculate. This is a guy with all of the skills to pay the bills. He lives up to the Marvin Harrison name. 12 games played last year, 117 targets, 67 receptions, 1,211 yards, 18.1 yards per reception, 14 total touchdowns, and back-to-back Michael Jordan 96-97 years with 1,200 plus receiving yards. And cherry on top, back-to-back years with 14 touchdowns. Again, he lives up to the Marvin Harrison name. He lives up to the family name. This is a guy that in year number one has the upside to be a top 5 wide receiver. I will be ecstatic to get him in my fantasy football drafts. And I think in your more casual leagues where people are going to get scared of drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. because he's a rookie in the second round, you might be able to get him in the middle of the second round instead of the early second round. In round number 3, we got Nico, cousin, let's go bowling Collins of the Houston Texans, aggregate ADP pick 28, underdog fantasy ADP wide receiver 12 at pick 17.1. Now, Nico Collins is a guy that I believe is very polarizing this season. There are people with me that are going to bang the drum in the war line like a fucking drummer boy, like you're watching The Patriot with Mel Gibson in the Revolutionary War, right? And people are, there's the drummer boy banging the drum, right? That's what I'm doing right now. Sitting here banging the drum, and there's cannon fire going all around me. There's muskets being shot at me, right? But just like 50 Cent, I'm going to get shot and I'm still going to breathe, right? Because I believe that Nico Collins is going to dominate this year yet again. This is a guy that in terms of efficiency was incredible last year. 10th in target quality rating, 2nd in yards per route run, 3rd in yards per target, 9th in yards per reception, 10th in yards per team pass attempt, 5th in expected points added, and 3rd in fantasy points per target. But Nick, they brought in Stephon Diggs. I get they have Diggs. I get that they have Tank Dell, right? They have the best threesome at the wide receiver position that you've ever done seen. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, I believe Nico Collins will reign supreme as the number one receiver in this offense. This is going to be an offense that is literally beating down on teams. They're going to hit the team with the uppercut in the first quarter. In the second quarter, they're going to hit them with a left fucking haymaker in the third quarter. They're going to do a roundhouse kick. And in the fourth quarter, the other team's going to be unconscious and they're going to be beating them down, waiting for Herb Dean to stop the fight. What Alex Pereira did to Jamal Hill, that is what the Houston Texans are going to do to teams in the NFL this year. They are going to beat the ever-living shit out of them. So, Nico Collins, I understand, Stephon Diggs, and sure, they have Tank Dell. I get why some people are spooked, but this is a guy that was the wide receiver 12 last year in PPR, wide receiver 7 in PPR points per game. 15 games played, 10 starts, 109 targets, 7.3 per game, 80 receptions, 5.3 per game, 1,297 receiving yards, 86.5 per game, number 8 at wide receiver, and 8 total touchdowns, 11th. I understand there is clear risk with Nico Collins. He isn't like bubble wrapping your fantasy football roster. But at the end of the day, unless something comes out of training camp or preseason where it's like, all right, Stephon Diggs is clearly the number 1 wide receiver in this offense, which I don't believe will happen unless there are injuries, right? I think Stephon Diggs might be 3rd in the pecking order in this offense in terms of targets. I think unless something comes out that is so positive about Stephon Diggs, literally getting the beat reporter is on their knees, giving the Gawk 9000 special, fondling the balls of Stephon Diggs, that I will, with 100% confidence, be drafting Nico Collins in the 3rd round as a wide receiver that you can get in the 3rd round that I think could easily finish inside the top 10 or the top 12. I think that Nico Collins is going to shut up a lot of people that are scared to draft him this season. So I am ecstatic to get one of the best wide receivers, in my opinion, in the NFL. I understand that, Nico Collins hasn't been great until last year. Well, if you actually watch the tape of him with Davis Mills, you could have seen it coming. I was aggressively talking about Nico Collins last year. I was screaming into the microphone about how you want to draft Nico Collins, and I'm going to do the same thing today, this season. I want Nico Collins in the 3rd round of 2024. Fantasy football draft. Sorry about being a little bit blurry there. I fixed it. That's why there was that pause right there, that dramatic pause. So at number 4, we got Cooper Kupp, 4th round, LA Rams, underdog ADP, wide receiver 21, pick 28, aggregate ADP, pick 41. Now, Cooper Kupp, prior to last season, suffered an injury that is literally the Achilles heel of a wide receiver, but it wasn't actually the Achilles. It was a hamstring strain. Or at least I know as a fantasy player for a long time, that the hamstring injury, having any type of hamstring strain prior to the season, when you're knocking on the door of the season as close as the injury was for Cooper Kupp, that is going to be a recipe for disaster. So Cooper Kupp hit with the hamstring strain, and he comes back and he still looks solid. Now, did Cooper Kupp necessarily look like the old Cooper Kupp that won the Triple Crown? I think he won the Super Bowl MVP up against the Bengals, right? The best wide receiver in the league that year, and Cooper Kupp has been one of the best wide receivers in the league, prior to last season. And I understand that everyone is just falling for Puka Nacua, and rightfully so. I like Puka Nacua as well. But Puka Nacua can be the 1A, but Cooper Kupp is going to be the 1B. He had multiple games last year, 3 games with 25 plus PPR points. This is a wide receiver that sure didn't look like his old self necessarily last year, but I think that's because of the hamstring strain. And I think a year removed from that, he's going to look a lot more like the old Cooper Kupp that we're used to. And still playing in 12 games, sure, he was the wide receiver 40 in PPR, but he was a top 24 wide receiver in PPR points per game. He had 95 targets, 7.9 per game, 59 receptions, 4.9 per game, 737 receiving yards, 61.4 per game, and he only scored 5 touchdowns, which I think could easily go up this season. He ranked 22nd in fantasy points per route, 19th in route win rate, 21st in target separation, and 13th in true catch rate. Again, coming off of an injury that completely butt fucks skill position players. So Cooper Kupp's going to come back for vengeance. I get, he's a little bit older, right? And that's going to scare some people. Not me. In the 4th round, I think Cooper Kupp is a steal. In the 5th round, we got Zay Flowers. Now, Zay Flowers is far from the safe pick, in my opinion, because I don't believe that Zay Flowers will be one of the most consistent wide receivers in fantasy football this season, but I think a lot more consistency is coming this season compared to his rookie year. Zay Flowers, aggregate ADP pick 50, Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 26 at pick 35.5. Now, the end of last season didn't go the best for Zay Flowers. He ended up basically putting the bow on top of the demise of the Baltimore Ravens when he fumbled the ball. He basically threw the dirt on the casket as it was getting lowered down, right? But I think that Zay Flowers is going to have that Undertaker moment, right? Where he pops out of the casket. I understand he fucking raged like the Hulk, right? He loses the fumble and he's throwing shit on the sideline. He messes up his finger. Obviously not the best look, right? But Zay Flowers, as a rookie in a run-heavy offense, I know they're going to be run-heavy again. I understand that. They brought in Derrick Henry for a reason. Zay Flowers can play ball. Wide receiver 32 in PPR points per game. He had 108 targets, 6.8 per game, number 26. 77 receptions, 4.8 per game, number 22. 858 receiving yards, 53.6 per game, 33rd, and 6 total touchdowns, 27th. I get, we all love to give the Suka Lamink. We all love to give the Hawk Tua to Puka Nacua, right? He was the rookie wide receiver to have last season. And sure, I'll give him the crown, right? The best rookie wide receiver. But that doesn't mean that Zay Flowers is some certified bum, right? And if you look at the Baltimore Ravens offense, outside of Mark Andrews, sure, they have my guy Rashad Master Bateman, who just never works out, even though we just kind of fall in love with him because the videos of him in shorts look exquisite, right? But Zay Flowers is that guy. He's the number one weapon in this offense, or maybe the 1B if you consider Mark Andrews the 1A. He ranked 7th in target separation last year, 6th in route run rate, and 18th in snap share. They believe more in him entering into this season, like I believe they do, with Lamar Jackson, who is a criminally underrated passer. I think Zay Flowers has very big upside game in and game out. I hope that there is more consistency this season because there wasn't a lot of consistency last year, right? He'd be in and then he's out, he's up and he's down, he's having the big games, he's having these down games, right? But I think he will find more consistency in his second year while also still having the upside to blow the roof off and help win any given week. So Zay Flowers in Baltimore. I like to put my eggs into great offenses, and I think that the Houston Texans, we already talked about them with Nico Collins. I think the Baltimore Ravens will be that, and I like Zay Flowers a lot this year. At number 6, we got Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Aggregate ADP pick 63, Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 30 at pick 44.6. Now last year wasn't the best season for Christian Kirk in Jacksonville. Wide receiver 33 in PPR points per game, tied with Garrett Wilson and the Born King, Kendrick Bourne. 12 games played with 12 starts. Now he missed the end of the season with a torn groin. 85 targets, 7.1 per game. 57 receptions, 4.8 per game. 787 receiving yards, not reception. Imagine he had 787 receptions. 65.6 per game and 3 total touchdowns, 58th. While those stats aren't orgasmic, while those stats don't, like, when I say them, you're not just salivating thinking, ooh, Christian Kirk, what a great receiver. Efficiency-wise, 19th in yards per route run, 14th in drew catch rate, 7th in route win rate versus man, and he ranked 14th in target accuracy. I fully understand that the team brought in Gabe Davis. I fully understand the team drafted Brian Thomas Jr., and that they have Evan Ingram, Mr. Eazy-E himself. But at the end of the day, I think Christian Kirk will reign resilient as the number one receiver in this offense. Christian Kirk, back when he was in Arizona, was a wide receiver that won leagues. So it wouldn't be all that crazy to say that Christian Kirk could be a league winner in Jacksonville. If Trevor Lawrence is able to stay healthy, because towards the end of last season, sure, he had that big fall off like Humpty Dumpty off the wall. Christian Kirk didn't necessarily have to experience that because he got hurt 12 games into the season and missed the end of the season with a torn groin, which sounds like it would really hurt. But Christian Kirk Again, I think the guy has all of the skill to be the number one receiver on an offense that I think, sure, are the Jaguars going to be like a top 5 offense? I wouldn't think so, right? Maybe they are, but I wouldn't think so. But I still think with Trevor Lawrence touchdown, Jesus himself, with Aemon Targaryen slinging the fucking rock without the eye patch, Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, I think that is a duo, a match made in heaven here. I think that Christian Kirk is the best receiver in this offense. Like, Gabe Davis hasn't really shown us anything. Sure, he's had those couple of flashes. He had that big game against the Chiefs in the playoffs, which led to a big fat L. Shout out to the Buffalo Bills fans. So Christian Kirk, I think, and I know they have Brian Thomas as well, but not I think, I know Christian Kirk will be the number one wide receiver in this Jags offense. And I think this is a team that's going to be percolating offensively. There's a lot of big upside for Christian Kirk. And I think that based upon what we saw last season, we should be able to make a educated guess, right? Again, I really feel like I know, right? I rubbed the crystal ball. I saw the future. I know that Christian Kirk will be the number one wide receiver here. The efficiency stats, hell yeah, how good he is. And to me, if he can get just a couple more touchdowns, right? 3 touchdowns, pretty low. If he's a guy that gets 6, 7, gets 8 touchdowns with the amount of targets I foresee him seeing, this is a guy that could be a top 12 receiver that you're seeing come off the board as the wide receiver number 30. At number 7, we got Jayden Riley Reed of the Green Bay Packers, the Cheeseheads. Underdog Fantasy ADP, wide receiver 34, pick 54.9. Aggregate ADP, pick 73. Now, there could be a debate on who the number one wide receiver in terms of targets will be in Green Bay. Could be Dontavian Wicks. Could be Christian Watson. Could be Romeo Dobbs. Could be Jayden Reed, right? I think more than likely it's going to be either Jayden Reed or Christian Watson. Now, you might say, Nick, since this is kind of a confusing situation at the wide receiver position, why do you feel so confident in Jayden Reed? The reason why I feel confident in Jayden Reed is because my assumption that he's the number one wide receiver comes at a 7th round draft price. It doesn't come in round 3 or 4 where we're guessing that he's the number one guy. It comes in round number 7. I understand the thought process of early on bubble wrapping that team, right? Not rubbing the condom, pause. A little weird, of rolling the condom over your squad, right? I get it. Early on, stay safe. Don't be silly. Wrap your willy. But as you get deeper in the draft, you need to take the risks that have high upside that could pay humongous dividends. And Jayden Reed can do that. Jayden Reed last year in terms of efficiency, 5th in fantasy points per target. He ranked 8th in fantasy points per route run. He ranked 22nd in route win rate and 36th in target accuracy. Like we talked about earlier, I am targeting with this pick an offense that I believe has the upside to score a bunch of points. We saw that Jordan, love me tender, love me sweet, last year can play ball. I know that was a laughable pick when they had Aaron Rodgers, Mr. Discount, double check Mr. State Farm. But now looking back, it looks like the Green Bay Packers got a fucking steal. A heist. Shout out to Lester from GTA. So with great quarterback play comes great upside. With great power comes great responsibility. With great offensive play by Jordan Love comes great upside for Jayden Reed, right? Wide receiver 26 last year in PPR points per game, 25 in PPR. 13 starts, 16 games played. 5.9 targets per game. 4 receptions, so almost 100 targets, 64 receptions, 793 receiving yards, 49.6 per game, and 10 total touchdowns, 5th. While Christian Watson was the touchdown king with Aaron Rodgers, with Jordan Love, it appears that Jayden Reed is his favorite target. So, in conclusion of this statement, to put that bow on the statement, if Jayden Reed ends up as the wide receiver 1 in this offense, which I think he has the best odds, in my opinion, to do so, he is going to have great upside in the 7th round. To me, he will be a low-end wide receiver 2 or high-end wide receiver 3 would be a safe projection, right? a very reliable flex option every week in the 7th round, with the upside to maybe be a high-end wide receiver too, because of how great the Green Bay Packers offense is. So in the 7th round, I'm willing to take that shot. Again, training camps open up soon, right? Just like we talked about with Nico Collins, right? If we start to hear all this buzz that Stephon Diggs is really stepping up and Nico Collins taking the back seat, then sure, I'll start to panic on Nico Collins and maybe I'll retract my statement, right? If it comes out Christian Watson's the clear number 1, the favorite, or Romeo Doubs or Dontavian Wicks, then sure, maybe it's time to, start shivering a little like that guy at the end of The Shining, right? When Jack Nicklaus, when he gets into the cold and he starts shivering because he fucking dies out there. At least I think that's the end of the movie. That movie is very confusing. You gotta watch a bunch of YouTube videos to figure out what truly happens. That's a great movie. But Jayden Reed, I'm not nervous about him right now. Again, if something comes out, hey, Jayden Reed is taking the back seat, Jayden Reed is not really taking advantage of this opportunity, then sure, time to panic. But right now, no reason not to take him in the 7th round. In the 8th round, we got Diontae Johnson. Now, I think if you're comparing Jayden Reed to Diontae Johnson, say based upon ADP, maybe late August, they're both 7th round picks. Jayden Reed, to me, would be the high upside option, right? He would be the home run swing with more risk because there is more competition. Diontae Johnson's competition is Adam Thielen and Xavier, somebody touch on my spaghetti Leggett, right? Or Adam Thielen balled last season. I don't think Xavier Leggett is necessarily a pushover, but it's not like Diontae Johnson is competing with Randy Moss, Calvin Johnson, Chad Ochocinco, a bunch of studs, right, at wide receiver. Understand, Bryce Young didn't look great in his rookie year, right? But the Panthers were a team that was on fire, and not on fire the fun way, NBA Jam style, not on fire the fun way like Mario, right? When he gets the fireballs that he's shooting out of his arse, Mel Gibson style, right? No, that's not, he was on fire like stop, drop, and roll. Like, hey, the team's burning down around me. Nothing's going well in Carolina. They get rid of their coach. Now, I'm not saying that the Carolina Panthers now have hired the best coach on earth, but hopefully things are better, you would assume, right? And sometimes an assumption makes an ass out of you and me, but I'm going to make that assumption. Diontae Johnson has proven to us throughout his career that he is a guy that can be a target hog in the offense, sucking in balls like his name was Mia Malkova, right? So, if this guy ends up as a target hog in the Carolina Panthers offense, and this is a guy that's not like some super deep down the field stretcher, right, where Bryce Young needs to have pinpoint keyhole accuracy to hit him deep down the field. Not what's going to be happening with Diontae Johnson. This is a guy that's only really ever going to be like 20 yards away from the quarterback, right? And most of the time, he's a lot closer in than that. That's at least how it worked in Pittsburgh, and I assume the Carolina Panthers have enough brain cells to realize to do that. And while Diontae Johnson has had his issues in the past with just holding onto the ball, entering into last season, the 33rd team was doing all of this analysis on the best route runners in the NFL, and they ranked him as a top 10 route runner in the NFL. Now, I'm not going to necessarily proclaim the mountaintops to the fantasy football gods that he's one of the best route runners in the NFL, but I think he's good at it, right? He's able to get open. He ranked 3rd in Dominator rating last year. He only had 3 drops, which was great. But he had the 77th highest target accuracy because the quarterbacks in Pittsburgh couldn't hit the broad side of a barn, right? It was embarrassing play by Kenny Pickett. It was embarrassing play by Kissing Titties Mitchell Trubisky. By Mason Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, looked like the best quarterback there. That's how you know everything went wrong. He missed 4 games with a strained hamstring that occurred in week 1. So he played in 13 games, right? He had a down bad season as a Diontae Johnson Stan, wide receiver 41 in PPR points per game. He had 87 targets, 51 receptions, 717 receiving yards, and 5 total touchdowns. But again, I am rolling those stats up in a ball. Obi throwing them in the garbage, right? Get out of here. I'm not worrying about those stats. I'm worrying about what I think I'm going to see, or I'm thinking about what I'm going to see in Carolina. I'm going to see the number 1 receiver in targets. I'm going to see a guy that has been able to put NFL defenses in the figure 4 in fantasy football before from a sheer crazy amount of targets, and I believe he's going to get those crazy amount of targets in Carolina. So I think he's a lot safer than Jayden Reed, but I don't necessarily think the upside is there in Carolina for him to truly smash as like a top 12 guy. Moving now to the 9th round, we got JSN, Jackson, Smith-Njigba of the Seattle Seahawks. If you guys have enjoyed this video thus far, make sure that whether you are new to the channel or not, you leave a like on today's video. And if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. So JSN of the Seattle Seahawks, aggregate ADP pick 97, Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 46 at pick 78.6. Wide receiver 47 last year and 59 in PPR points per game. So if you drafted JSN last year in his rookie year, it didn't go well, right? Things went down and JSN went down with the ship. Geno Smith in 2022 was on top of the world. The NFL wrote him off and he didn't write back, right? We remember it's like, wow, Geno Smith, maybe he's that guy. Maybe, after being in the NFL for like 10 fucking years, he finally figured it out, right? And then in 2023, he goes back to being the old Geno Smith, right? So obviously the quarterback play here in Seattle is definitely suspect. But what I will say is that I think the team is going to push more towards utilizing JSN. JSN was a guy that ranked 17th in route win rate last year and 6th in target separation, but it didn't, the fact that he's always fucking open like 7-11 didn't really mean anything because he only had 93 targets, 5.5 per game. 63 receptions, 3.7 per game, 36.9 receiving yards, and 4 total touchdowns, 43rd at wide receiver. But lucky for us, the Seattle Seahawks brought in a new head coach. They got rid of that old man, Pete Carroll, sent him to the retirement home where he can go chew all the gum he wants, chew on some Hubba Bubba Max, and they brought in Mike McDonald. Old McDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And recently, he has said, JSN is a guy that we can focus our offense around, along with other guys. Head coach Mike McDaniel said on JSN a couple of weeks ago via ESPN's Brady Henderson, Tyler Lockett is still a great player. DK Metcalf, phenomenal player. The runners, Noah Fant, but JSN is going to be a massive piece of what we're doing offensively. Last season, when you saw that they tried to push the game plan onto JSN, he was doing wonders, right? He dropped his nuts into the mouth of the Dallas Cowboys on prime time for the whole world to see. In Jerry's world, I believe that game was. But for the whole season, it wasn't bringing out the red carpet for JSN to use him super heavily in his rookie year like we thought had the potential to do. Now, in his second year, I believe that red carpet's coming out for JSN. I believe in the 9th round with all the skill that he possesses coming out of college, out of Ohio State, based upon the upside that I saw last year, again, based upon the fact that he was easily able to get open and the ball just wasn't coming his way, tells me that in the second year, he's going to make a big leap. In round number 10, we got Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions, aggregate ADP, pick 109, Underdog Fantasy ADP, wide receiver 48 at pick 85.5. Shout out to Underdog Fantasy. They are the sponsor of today's video. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy and click on the link in the video description or use promo code Notorious, you can claim your special pick plus up to $250. If you are a first-time depositor, Underdog Fantasy is my favorite place to do best ball fantasy football drafts in the summer. I love best ball because it's the best part about fantasy football. You do the draft and that's it, right? You don't have to worry about setting the lineup. You don't have to worry about forgetting to do the waivers. You don't have to remember to make some trades, right? You just draft your team, and then Underdog automatically puts the highest scorers into your lineup every single week. Underdog Fantasy has buy-ins for tournaments as low as $3. The big tournament is $25 to enter $1.5 million to first place. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy and want to do some drafts, I'm going to be doing live drafts on there all the time. The last live draft was on Saturday. I did 2 of those. 2 fast puppies on there. There's only $5 to enter. So again, if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, you want to start drafting on there, I think it's very fun. Claim your special pick plus up to $250 if you're a first-time depositor using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description. So Jameson Williams, Underdog ADP, wide receiver 48, pick 85.5, aggregate ADP, pick 109. This is a guy that is basically defined by one word, and that would be speed, right? Lightning McQueen, you think speed. Jameson Williams, I think speed. A guy from Scarface, Tony Montana, you also think speed for him as well, right? He loves that cocaine, But Jameson Williams. Now, last couple of years, shit hasn't been sweet for Mr. JMO, right? Nothing has really went well. Last year, 12 games played, 10 starts. He's the wide receiver, 82 in PPR, 73 in PPR points per game. He only has 41 targets, 24 receptions, 354 receiving yards, 3 total touchdowns, 58th. He ranks second in contested catch rate and 38th in target separation. But what changes, in my opinion, from the last couple years versus this year is how integrated Jameson Williams is in the offseason program. Dan Campbell said a couple of weeks ago, if you give me one guy that is the most improved this offseason, Jameson Williams would be that guy. Jared Goff also giving praise, saying that this is the first off season where Jameson Williams has been able to run with the starters. That's going to be huge for Jameson Williams. While Jameson Williams is a notorious gambler because he got suspended last season for fucking betting, Jameson Williams now going to have that first offseason of working with the team, and I think that is going to do wonders for him. A guy with big speed, sure, sometimes it can crash and burn. It might not end up going well, but for Jameson Williams in the 10th round, attaching yourself to the Lions offense, that's going to be scoring a lot of points. They love to throw the ball in Detroit. Goff is basically a lock to be top 3, top 5 in terms of pass attempts if he's able to stay healthy, knock on wood. So Jameson Williams is in a pretty good spot here. I don't think Jameson Williams is going to jump over, hurdle over Amon-Ra St. Brown and become the number one option in this offense. I think there's like a 0.001% chance of that. But if he's just the number 2 wide receiver on this team with the big play upside, the 25 plus point upside, due to the fact that he could burn a guy deep down the field, have 3 catches for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, right? That's the upside I'm trying to take in the 10th round. And he's still young, so you can definitely see that, he's not like some old fuck that it's like, oh, this is his first time going with the offense. He's 33 years old, right? He's going out there with a walker. No, he's still pretty young. So I like the upside of Jameson Williams, and I like what the coaches and what Jared Goff have been saying. At number 11, we got Jakobi Meyers of the Las Vegas Raiders. Aggregate ADP pick 129, underdog fantasy ADP wide receiver 57 at pick 119.7. Jakobi Meyers last year was the wide receiver 24 in PPR, the wide receiver 25 in PPR points per game, and yet he's coming off the board right now as the wide receiver 57. Nick, why is that? I don't know. I understand that the Raiders are a run-heavy offense, and I understand that Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell aren't the answer in Las Vegas, right? Those aren't the guys that are going to lead the Las Vegas Raiders to the promised land. Those aren't the future of the Raiders. The Raiders, right? But they're serviceable. And there's also a rumor, which again, I'm not going to buy all into the rumor. There is a rumor that Davante Adams is going to get traded to the Jets. Again, I'm not saying to take out a second mortgage on your house and bet that on the Raiders trading Davante Adams to the Jets, but if that was to happen, Jakobi Meyers' ADP is going to move at a rapid pace. It is going to go from the 11th round, the 10th round, the 9th round, to the 8th round, and maybe even higher than that. Because again, he was the wide receiver 24 in PPR last year, 25 in PPR points per game. With Davante fucking Adams, this guy had 106 targets, 6.6 per game, number 28. 71 receptions, 4.4 per game, number 28. 807 receiving yards, 50.4 per game, number 34. 10 total touchdowns, 5th. This is a guy that in New England, kind of allergic to the end zone. 36th in route win rate, 14th in dominator rating, 26th in fantasy points per route run, 19th in fantasy points per target. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Jakobi Meyers is one of the best receivers in the NFL. He's not. But as the wide receiver 2 in Las Vegas, sure, I get they want to run the ball. The upside's still high, though, even with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, because Jakobi Meyers is good enough to finish as that top 20. And I think that he's going to be a guy that's pretty reliable as your flex. Sure, there's going to be some games where he just isn't able to get the ball. The Raiders are running a lot. Adams is maybe just having a fucking buffet meal, right? The guy has 10 catches, 145 yards, 3 touchdowns or something crazy, right? There's going to be those games, right, where Jakobi Meyers is kind of iced out. But that's fine because he's wide receiver 57 off the board. He's going in the 11th round. So with the upside that he possesses, based upon what we saw last season, like, what are we thinking? Wide receiver 57? Seems like we're drastically overthinking things here. In the 12th round, we got Troy Franklin, Denver Broncos, aggregate ADP pick 143. Underdog Fantasy pick 172, wide receiver 77. Now, I think Troy Franklin is clearly just a diamond in the rough fucking home run shot, right? There is nothing attached to Troy Franklin that would tell you that he's a safe, right? He's a 4th round NFL draft pick this year, coming out of Oregon as a 20-year-old, 13 games played last year, 20-year-old, 81 receptions on 115 targets, 1,383 yards, 17.1 yards per reception, and 14 touchdowns. Solid player. What moves me towards Troy Franklin, Franklin the Turtle, is the shower narrative. We're not talking Sandusky here. We're talking about how Bo Nix, Troy Franklin played at Oregon together. So there's already that connection, that 5G LTE, that peanut butter and jelly connection. Peanut butter jelly time, all right? Broncos wide receiver depth chart also. Portland Sutton. Besides Sutton, you got Josh Reynolds, Marvin Mimsy, Tim Patrick, who can't stay healthy to save his life, and Troy Franklin. Like, it's pretty obvious that there's a good shot he's the number 2 receiver there because of the connection he has with Bo Nix. So that alone is what makes me want to draft him. Again, there's been positive reports out of the early processes in camp. If there's not positive reports, if it's like pretty clear he's going to be buried in the depth chart, then sure, we're not going to draft him in the 12th round. But right now, if I'm just looking at pure upside, if he ends up as the number 2 receiver on a Denver team that maybe surprises people, right? You paint the picture, hey, maybe Sean Payton is a little bit better this year. Maybe the offense works better without Mr. Unlimited Russell Wilson. And maybe Bo Nix is better than we think. And his friend Troy Franklin's the guy that's out there a lot, so he just feeds him the ball. That's the positive argument. Again, there's a lot of downside with Troy Franklin. But again, when you're in the 12th fucking round, you don't need to be taking safe picks. Not at all. At round 13, Brandin Cooks. Now, Brandin Cooks, definitely significantly safer than Troy Franklin. But my point on Brandin Cooks, I'll keep it short and simple here. Brandin Cooks is coming off the board, pick 152. Underdog Fantasy, wide receiver 56, pick 114.8. The Dallas Cowboys in the offseason bring in no one as competition for CeeDee Lamb. They don't. No one else there. They even got rid of one of their wide receivers who's now on the Raiders. So they really, it's like CeeDee Lamb and Brandin Cooks and Jake Ferguson out there catching the ball, and then Zeke chilling back there as the running back, right? They really don't have anyone to compete with Brandin Cooks. Now, Brandin Cooks didn't look amazing last year. Wide receiver 45 in PPR points per game, 38 in PPR. He had 81 targets, 54 receptions, 657 receiving yards, and 8 total touchdowns. He ranked second. He ranked 16th in true catch rate and 9th in contested catch rate. Brandin Cooks has always been one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. And even despite being on a million teams, he's always treaded water. He's always been solid. He's never been one of the best receivers in the NFL, in my opinion. Actually, early on in his career, even then, you still probably, like with the Saints, would have said he's one of the best receivers, but he's still really solid on all of those teams. He's always found his footing, and he's done the same thing here in Dallas. I don't think Brandin Cooks is going to come out and steal CeeDee Lamb's job, but I think that the Dallas Cowboys offense wants to throw I know that with fat Mike McCarthy, the Kool-Aid man, they want to run the ball. Throw the ball, and I think that's going to benefit Brandin Cooks. Pretty clearly going to outperform his wide receiver 56 ADP, and if he becomes more of a reliable target for the Cowboys, he could be in a 3 wide receiver league, he could be your flex. So that's how I look at Brandin Cooks here. And maybe he's a nice fill-in positive matchups. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you hit that like button down below, hit that subscribe button. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. I'm sorry, my voice is still a little bit messed up. I don't know what I got in Vegas, maybe gonorrhea or something. So I love you guys. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. Love y'all. Have a great one. As always, good boy.